Here, you can hold this camera. And that's on. Hey everyone, it's Kenji. I'm not at home today. I'm here at Milk Street with my old boss, Chris Kimball, who is going to show. We're going to cook some fettuccine Alfredo, right?
That's the authentic way.
The
right?
authentic way.
Yeah, the authentic way.
You can stick that camera on your head. Need some help here. Are people allowed to touch you like that?
Yes, I'm not the queen.
All right. So what are we doing?
Well, let's start with the story. The story is that if you go to Rome, there are two restaurants, both started by the same guy. And his concept was, as you know, a heavy cream-based recipe.
Right, the kind that we get here.
My editor, Jason, spent some time a couple months ago in Italy tracking this down. And the real recipe was pasta with butter and cheese.
Right.
But it was something mothers would make for kids who weren't feeling well.
Right.
They have
it's like the
tummy.
chicken soup.
Yeah.
So if I get this right, the version of fettuccine Alfredo we know in the U.S., which is this kind of creamy, thick, gloppy sauce, that actually was invented in Italy.
In Rome.
In
but
Rome.
It was something that was mostly served to tourists.
So it was invented in Italy for Americans to eat.
Essentially. I mean,
Got it.
I don't think any locals go and have
They don't.
8,000 calories.
Are there restaurants that actually serve like fettuccine Alfredo without all that stuff in Rome?
Well, as you know, all the great food's home cooking. I think this is just a recipe that mothers make for their kids at home. And no one's running around calling it Alfredo,
Right.
nor do they think it's a recipe.
Right.
It's just something you make
It's just
for
something
your kids.
you make. You just do it.
Yeah, it's like, it doesn't have a name, it's not Hollywood, it's just something people make.
Yeah.
But it turns out that that's the real deal, right?
Got it.
So, okay, we have the 2 quarts going. I put a teaspoon and a half of salt in.
Okay, and you're ready to cook the pasta now. We don't have to do anything else?
No, we're going to
Prepping
go
nothing?
do some other stuff while the pasta's cooking, which is going to cook really quickly.
Okay.
Now,
And the idea here is that you're using this little water because you want starch from the pasta to come out into the water so that when we emulsify the sauce, it actually helps that sauce emulsify properly.
If you go to Italy and you go to like say an outdoor restaurant that's huge, you've been there, huge pots of water. But the thing people forget is they're making 200
Right.
portions.
Right.
So it's not like they needed all that water for 1 pound of pasta. They're making 150 pounds of pasta.
Yeah, this is the thing. You know, my first restaurant job before I worked for you even was one of my first restaurant jobs was at Number 9 Park.
Oh, yeah.
Barbara Lynch's Northern Italian place, and I was on the pasta station. And the thing that I always found cool, you always add pasta water to the sauce as you're tossing the pasta and the sauce at the end before you serve it. The thing that I always found cool was that as the night went on, the pasta would get better and better because the pasta water would get starchier and starchier.
Well, I was years ago, it was back in the 80s, I was in small not far from Rome, little hilltop town. I was eating outside, and they had the big pot, and it just occurred to me, I just watched them,
Can I stir this around for you?
go ahead. Time after time, they were throwing in more pasta, right? Mm-hmm. So, I can turn the heat down a little.
Yeah, I was actually pre-pandemic. I have this New York Times thing now, and pre-pandemic, one of the articles I was working on, which I've not finished yet, was I actually got like a wok burner and one of those gigantic restaurant stock pots, and I was going to test, cook batch after batch of pasta, and then test the water to see how much starch was actually collecting in it as time went on to find sort of the ideal amount of starch in pasta.
Why does that sound so Kenji to me? You haven't changed at all.
So we're doing this recipe now. This is basically exactly as it's done in the magazine, right?
Yeah.
One thing I remember reading this in Milk Street saying how important it is to have the high fat butter.
Yes.
And I don't know if you have an answer. This is not a gotcha, and I don't know if you have an answer to this or not. But when I was reading that, I was thinking, okay, so American butter is usually like 80 to 81% fat. The rest is like water, protein, stuff like that. Whereas European butter is often like 83 to 85% fat, so a few percentage points more. But if we're melting the butter and we're adding pasta water to it, ultimately, how does that extra 2 or 3% help? Can you just add more American butter?
I knew there was going to be a moment like this. Okay. So first of all, let me just get this out of here.
Okay, yeah, before it overcooks. Yeah.
And you can also have a fair amount of water going into it. Well, my experience is if you get, the Irish butter or if you get Kluger or something, or the French, the heavily salted stuff, escheret. It just seems to me that it emulsifies better when you make a sauce or something. And I know that you think if you add water, I think it's the way the butter is emulsified in and of itself. I know that's not scientific, and you're scientific.
No, I mean,
but that's my take on it.
And I'm sure you did the tests to prove it, right?
Yeah, I don't use the 80-81% anymore. I always go for the higher stuff.
Yeah.
It really makes a difference. And I guess...
On your toast also.
Well, first of all, you want to talk about salted butter? Anyone who uses unsalted butter on toast or pancakes needs... Yeah, that's not good at all. So I'm really not a fan of that.
So, yeah, so we can see like how nice and starchy that is. Right?
Yeah, so...
This is something, like, actually, even, whenever I'm making one of these kind of classic Roman pasta dishes, which, like cacio e pepe or alla gricia, one of these sort of emulsified, fatty, quick pasta dishes, like, that's the trick that I always use is cook even if it's dry pasta, long pasta, I cook it in a skillet with just enough water to cover it because you need that. Yeah,
and also, if this was not fresh pasta, and if we were going to cook a sauce with it, I would undercook the dry pasta by 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And finish it in the pot or a skillet with the sauce.
Can I do something with this cheese?
Yeah, you can throw it in the food processor and grind it till it's nice and fine.
And can you do this with just like a microplane or a box grater? Like you don't need to pull out a food processor to do this?
You would do this with a microplane with 6 ounces of Parmesan? Yeah, if you have all afternoon. I don't think so.
What am I doing wrong here? Is that good?
Yeah, get it nice and fine.
Okay. So that's a lot of pasta water you're adding.
It's about half a cup. And one of the things...
How much butter was in there?
It's a whole stick, and we cut it into half-inch pats, and it has to be soft. Obviously, it can't be cold because you're gonna melt it with the heat of the pasta.
Right. And you want a kind of warm bowl? Is that the?
Yeah, warm bowl's good, and when you serve it, it's nice to have it in warm bowls too.
Yeah, so it doesn't congeal.
Any dish like this, if you use a cold bowl, it's gonna.
It's going to seize up as you try and serve it.
So I'm going to use about a cup of that now. You just throw that in.
Of the cheese?
Yeah.
So I have another question for you.
We're doing a little quarter cup.
Okay. Can I use my fingers? Yeah. When you cook at home, and I know you like make pies and you do your stuff at home. How often do you cook Milk Street style stuff at home these days?
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
And when you cook at home. So for me, like in my book, for example, I have this chili recipe that has like 40 ingredients and is 4 pages long and it takes 2 days to make, and it's ridiculously complicated. And part of that is like.
And you have a daughter who's 4 years old, and you still manage to do that?
No, I don't. And the thing is, so a lot of that for me, a lot of that was just showing like, hey, here are the things that matter when you're making chili. Like, I'm going to explain to you everything. Now you can choose what is important to you, right? And decide whether you want to go through that effort or not, or which parts of the effort are worth it. And, so for me, it's like, I made that recipe, I worked on that recipe for my book, and I haven't made it since. And that's not how I make chili at home. And so my question for you is, when you're cooking a Milk Street recipe at home, or even like an old Cook's Illustrated recipe, something like that, like how closely do you actually adhere to the recipe versus just, how much do you wing it?
There's 2 kinds of cooking. They are most Milk Street recipes are not complicated because they have big flavors going in. So if you're starting with gochujang or za'atar or whatever it is, or chili crisp, you don't need a lot of ingredients because you get all this flavor to start with, right? So, well, you know how to do that. So I would follow the recipe, and these are not complicated recipes. These are not 40 ingredients. Then there's the second kind of cooking where you're just cooking,
right? Where
you're not following a recipe at all. I don't have the interim part where I deconstruct a recipe and leave some things out. I'll either follow the recipe or just cook.
But are you measuring out your exact 2 tablespoons of chili crisp, or are you just kind of spooning it in the way you feel like it?
No, I spoon it in, unless it was baking. Yeah.
Unless
okay, I think that's enough cheese.
That's enough cheese there.
Yeah.
What's the rest of this for then?
To put on top when you serve.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was another interesting part of the story that I remember was that Josh Josh is the one who wrote it, right?
Jason.
Oh, Jason. I apologize. Jason. He was saying that in a dish like this, actually, if you add too much cheese, it tastes less cheesy than if you add just the right amount.
The other thing about this recipe and the story was the right
getting kinda creamy
proportions.
now, huh?
Yeah, we're gonna let it sit for a couple minutes just so it starts to get absorbed.
Okay.
And then we'll finish it off with a little more water. But yeah, it's getting just the right proportions. I mean, on one hand, you could say, why did you go to Italy and spend a week there and come back and write a 6-page article about pasta with butter and cheese?
Right.
Like, who needs a recipe for that? But it's getting the proportions right. It's using the starchy water. It's also doing a lot of tossing, which emulsifies it nicely. Because in a lot of like cacio e pepe is like one of those heartbreaking recipes that always ends up stringy and nasty unless you do it just right.
Unless you do it right, yeah.
Or you put some cornstarch in the water, whatever you do. This is one of those things where it's water, it's pasta, it's cheese, it's butter. You have to have the right proportions and you have to do it right. And that tossing, that constant tossing, we watched her. He watched her there on the skillet. I mean, she just tossed and tossed and tossed.
Yeah.
And that tossing was part of the secret of the recipe. We're just going to let it sit another minute. And
Did she do this resting thing?
I don't remember. I wasn't there. I think actually that's probably something we came up with. Our brilliant addition to the recipe.
Okay.
So we said let it rest for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Boy, we're so glad Milk Street.
Aha moment. Yeah.
We're really a big aha moment. But it's true. I mean, what I love about this is you and I have been doing this a long time. You think by now these classic recipes like how to make polenta or how to make a pesto, etc. You think there's nothing more to say about it because we've been doing this. The Italian Olive Oil Commission's been sending people to Italy since the 1970s. But it turns out you get there and you go like, oh, ragu bolognese, they don't put cream in it.
Yeah.
It's just meat, essentially.
Yeah.
And a few vegetables, a little wine, and whatever. But it's essentially meat. It's a meat sauce. So the only time they put cream in it, when I was there in Bologna, is the second or third day. So if it's left over and they want to, just add a little bit of creaminess to it, they might add a little cream.
Yeah.
But they don't make it with cream. And so you go, well, wait a minute. What did I thought dairy was part of bolognese. No.
Well, in that official whatever recipe, I can't remember. I can't remember what organization decided this is the official recipe.
No, I had that pamphlet. There's that pamphlet from that Emilia Romagna, right? They have their recipe book. And they do actually sometimes have cream in it. But if you talk to the local guys, they go, no, we don't put cream in it. I mean, if it's 3 days later, we want to like moisten it, we'll add a little dairy. But so, I mean, the point is that even after all this time, you go to Italy, and so with something simple as this, there's actually something to learn.
Yeah.
And you go like, well, that's pretty cool because, it's not over. It's not all done.
But it turns out people who've been cooking food for a long time know about their food.
Yeah, and also, as you know, Italian food's hyper-regional too. I mean, it's like, okay, so maybe someone in Milan does it one way and they do it differently down in Naples, so... and then you also discover the real Neapolitan pizza is actually soggy in the middle, and that's why you eat it with a knife and fork. And you go like, wait a minute, what's this soggy thing? And they go like, well, it's fresh buffalo mozzarella. What do you want?
I just told my daughter about my wife and I were in Naples for like a day, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, on our way to Sicily, and we went to 11 pizzerias in that one day, and I told my daughter about this. Who's 4, same age as your as Oliver, right? Is it Oliver's 4? And she got super excited about that. She's like, 11 pizzas in one day? How is it?
I need a little tiny bit of salt, not much.
Did you salt that pasta water?
You did, right?
I
did very well, actually, but...
It's definitely creamy.
Yeah.
What did you eat when you were sick as a kid? Did you get sick as a kid, ever? Does Chris Kimball catch colds?
Yeah, I think he did, yeah.
What would your parents make for you?
Well, my mother was, just to give you a sense, she, at one point in our lives, we lived in Westchester County, and we had a house on a corner, very kind of a busy corner, and very nice lawn. We had these beautiful beech trees, and it was gorgeous. Well, she decided to rip it up and put her organic garden.
Okay.
So she got like a load of like cow manure and threw it in. So we had a lot of organic vegetables, but she didn't know what to do with them. So she kind of like microwaved them or something. So the food was not ideal. Let me put it that way. I think we had our own beef and pork. We raised in Vermont, so we had really good quality food, but it was really basic.
But was it like when you were sick? Was it bland food? Was it like did you get chicken soup? Did you get pasta with butter?
I don't think. I can't remember the special when Chris is sick diet.
Okay.
I think it was. Yeah, I don't remember.
For me, it was we would have tamago gohan, which is like rice with an egg and soy sauce mixed into it. And then my mom was convinced that scallions get rid of coughs, and so she would take a bandana, wrap it around fresh scallions, and then tie it around my neck. And it didn't work. It made you stink, but it didn't. I don't think it actually got rid of the cough.
She was just messing with you.
I was worried, like with all the sitting around
It would start
and absorbing water, that it would start getting soggy,
nasty.
but it's not.
No.
Yeah, it's great.
No, it's good.
It's like you tested this recipe or something.
Maybe we made it once or twice. Yeah. No, it's so. The thing, as you said, is it tastes cheesy. I mean, you get the cheese flavor,
super cheesy,
but it's not overwhelming, right?
Yeah, no, it's great. All right.
One more mouthful. This is breakfast.
Oh yeah, sure. Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
It was good to have you working for free on my show for a change.
Let me see. Let me think about what you just said. You weren't working for free. It was just minimum wage.
Right.
That's a difference. There's a difference. Not much difference. Well, you certainly you seem to have flowered since you left. So your books are fabulous.
Oh, thanks. When my walk book is coming out.
Well, good.
In March, so
well, let me ask you.
I'll come back and cook with you. Yeah.
So the age-old question of can you actually stir fry on an American stovetop without a propane wok burner with 12 or 15,000 BTU? You just heat it up a long time. You don't use too much food in it.
So I think it's there's a multi-part question, but all right. So first of all, it's like most people in China don't have restaurant burners in their homes, right? They have maybe burners that are as strong or sometimes even weaker than American burners. So there's a difference between home cooking and restaurant cooking, and even within restaurant cooking, different regions have different styles of. So in the U.S., I think our view of Chinese food is tainted by the fact that when we think of Chinese food, we think of restaurant style Chinese food, and we specifically often think of Cantonese restaurant style Chinese food because that's where the first wave of immigrants came from, and that's a particular type of food that has a lot of this that wok hei, that smoky wok flavor. So when I think when I was younger, when I thought of Chinese food, that's what I thought of, and that's what I thought of up until I don't know, within the last decade or so, and then before realizing there are like other regions in China. There's people cooking at home in China all the time who don't cook these. They're not making chow fun, beef chow fun Cantonese style in their home burners. So part of it is resetting your expectations about what Chinese food is, but then of course there are like tricks and techniques you can use to make it easier to do on a
when I was in Taiwan a few years ago, and I went into a restaurant and they had 6 woks, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And massive 30,000 BTU burners. We did like 3-way chicken, a couple of things, but the fact of the matter is getting that charring and that browning quickly, the steam and everything else was part of the recipe. Is that possible at home, or you just have to completely adjust? So there's, so first of all, cooking outside, just getting like a wok burner, like a 30 or 60,000 BTU wok burner, that of course solves it. The technique I use is, cooking in batches, which is something that I think even Cooks Illustrated was promoting for a while, but cooking batches, I actually I did a New York Times story about this a few months ago. I can't remember when it was exactly, but using a blowtorch, that's what I do. So there's... Wait. How?
So if you practice enough, you can toss with one hand, have the torch in the other hand, and do that. What I recommend in my book, especially if you're beginning, is you cook in batches. Then you take, like, say I'm stir frying noodles, right? I would stir fry my noodles, spread them out onto a sheet tray, and then pass over it with the torch a few times. And because the flavor of wok hei comes. It's partly from the fast browning and the way things cook quickly, but it's a lot of it is the sort of the singed fat that falls back in the food. It's the same flavor that like you get when a burger drips onto the coals and the fat comes up and hits it. Which in Western cooking, like if you have too much of that, it's not a good thing. Like if I was at a French restaurant and like my steak caught on fire, we would throw it out and start over. But when you're cooking in a wok, like letting that flame actually go into the wok is part of it. And part of the flavor is also sort of the singeing of sauces. So when you see Chinese cooks cook on really high heat stir fries, what they do when they add like the soy sauce or whatever, they add it around the rim of the wok instead. So if you have like your noodles or whatever in the center of your wok, if you pour the soy sauce right on top of them, it kind of spreads out. It doesn't really evaporate quickly. You don't get any sort of flavor development from it, and it makes the food a little soggy. But if you pour it around the ridge of the rim of the wok, so that it evaporates and actually some of it actually like sears onto the sides, you develop a lot of those sort of flavors that we associate with wok, and then you toss everything together and pick up those flavors. But yeah, there's techniques.
I'll pick up a plumber's torch. Well, the other thing I found interesting, within 5 or 6 minutes, he deep fried in the wok.
Yeah.
He steamed in the wok. He boiled in the wok.
Yeah.
He stir fried in the wok. Yeah, and he just pour out the stuff, add new stuff, clean it out, whisk it out, do the next thing. And so you did, there weren't skillets or any other device for cooking. It was just the wok. It did everything. I was really impressed.
Yeah, it's the most versatile pan in your kitchen. Yeah.
All I need is that 30,000 BTU burner. Kenji, thank you.
All right, yeah, thank you. Sweet. All right, thanks.
We can touch now after COVID.
All right.
I love this.